Um, Today we have a very important speaker, an international speaker. And to introduce her and to go ahead with the proceedings, we have our beloved medical superintendent, Jomsi George, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jacob. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming in short notice. Today we have Dr. Mhoira Leng with us. Most of you might already know her. This is the third time she's visiting us. Dr. Mhoira is actually a consultant in palliative care. She's basically a physician. She's one of the earliest Scottish physicians who have moved into palliative care. And like Dr. Rajagopal has been instrumental in setting a lot of palliative care centers, in mentoring palliative care centers across Kerala, she has been instrumental in establishing palliative care centers in developing countries. So most of her work is in Africa. Uganda is one place where she's working. I had the fortune in working in Botswana. So when we looked at palliative care, we were following the Uganda model. So it is great to see that Dr. Mhoira Leng is part of that. She is also part of various international palliative care organizations, and she is also one of the activists. She is also part of various activities. She represents WHO also. She was in Gaza during the second attack. She was there. So we will hear a lot from her, and it will be a good, enriching experience. Let us put our hands and welcome Dr. Mhoira.
So good morning, and thank you for that lovely welcome. I know this is making a busy day for you because you had chapel, now the quest, and I think the Medifest is coming. Exciting. It's always a privilege to be here with you, and an honor to be asked to address this weekly meeting. And I hope this will be something that will make us think. There's two reasons for choosing this topic. I was asked to give a short address, or I offered a short address at the WHO Executive Board on this topic. And I realized it's something that the WHO talk about quite a lot. It's a new area, and I think it's a fascinating area for us to think about. Secondly, if I can go to my first slide, let's see if it's working. Yeah. Secondly, did you know that the International Day of Peace just happened? So it's an annual UN day just to make us focus. But this was the topic, cultivating a culture of peace. And talking about, as you know, peace is not just an absence of conflict. It has to be something much more positive. And here was the comment for this year. It is not only a time to lay down weapons and observe ceasefires, but it now must also be a time for people to see each other's humanity. Our survival as a global community depends on it. So that was the words of the UN. So I want to take you on a short journey of using some words. These are the words that I want to explore in relation to health, in relation to peace. The picture is of a beautiful bridge known as the Bridge to Peace. I think there are several in the world, but this one is in my country of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and it links in the city of Londonderry, which was a city very, very, very divided by the sectarian conflict in Northern Ireland, which lasted over 30 years. And the peace was brought about really by women from both sides, mothers, saying, we have to stop the damage that's being done to our families. So these are the words I'm going to talk about, and hopefully leave something with you today. This is a beautiful, I'm going to read this. This is a prayer, a meditation by John Philip Newell, who writes a lot about spirituality, and it's thinking about the image of God. So let me read it to you. Whichever way we turn, O God, there is your face, in the light of the moon and patterns of stars, in sacred mountain rifts and ancient groves, in mighty seas and creatures of the deep. Whichever way we turn, O God, there is your face In the light of eyes we love, in the salt of tears we have tasted, in weathered countenances, east and west, in the soft skin glow of the child everywhere. Whichever way we turn, O God, there is your face among us. It's talking about seeing God's face in others, and that is the essence of our humanity, that we are made in the image of God. Different faith contexts will have different ways of expressing it, but it's a very common theme. And when we start to really internalize what that means, and we heard that beginning statement, our humanity is at risk, we see other people as equal, we see them as fully human, and we see them as an image of God that we are privileged to encounter, interact with, loved with dignity and value and identity and rights. And then this should influence how we treat ourselves, because it applies to ourselves and the other person that we're interacting with. Conflict, however, is often, not always, but certainly global conflict, is often driven by fear and discrimination, which can move into abuse of power, supremacy, and this word dehumanization. I think we've been hearing this word. I've been thinking a lot about genocide because of what's happening, particularly in Gaza. And there is a museum to genocides in Rwanda. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, run by the Aegis Trust. And they have 5 or 6, I think it's 6 examples globally of genocides. And the commonality is dehumanization. Once I dehumanize somebody else, however I do it, through race or inequality, then in a sense I can do anything. And you're hearing words in this particular conflict of animals don't deserve to live, the whole population is responsible, kill the children because when they grow up, they will become the next soldiers or army. Dehumanization, we must be very careful. It starts small and then it grows. And I want to think for a moment about conflict because justice is one of the core ingredients of peace. Yeah, without justice, it's very difficult to find peace. Of course, justice is tempered by mercy, and that is often how we reach peace, but we have to tell the truth first. And this is just an example of today, the active conflicts, and there are some not mentioned there, but this was from a conflict watch list. So our world is in trouble and in conflict. Where is the peace? I have a very dear friend I spoke to yesterday with Dr. Philip Finney, who's a theologian in Indigenous studies. His name is Young Hallam Haukip, and he is based in just outside Imphal. He's with the Kuki people. Any of you been to Imphal? So I visited there once, and we've stayed in touch, but really the situation there is very, very, very serious. He was saying there is alerts for more trouble this month. You can see the pictures, that's them trying to get to the villages to build. This is building with local materials, trying to take medicines. He said yesterday they had run out of all medicines. So in your own country here, there is a state in conflict. And I was hoping that Dr. Philip Finney might be able to connect up. His wife is a doctor in this small team, the Bethesda unit. And they have a concept in the Kuki people called kanko. I think I talked about this last time. A sense of togetherness, a community where I am because we are. That is the African way of putting it. Kanko has the same concept in Indigenous people. That's how they create peace in their community. That I am only I when I am we, when I'm together. It was also quite recently, just the end of last year, the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We quote human rights a lot, but when I was rereading it, I was struck that it was about freedom, justice, and peace for the human family. And let me read these lines from it. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. They're endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. I mention this because one of the concerns of the UN is that we are abandoning this. This was set up to protect the world from countries that might start to have conflicts that go beyond what should be there in terms of the rights and protections of civilians in particular. And I think you know that my heart is very much with the people of Gaza. For 10 years, I've had the privilege of working there. And I was there in April this year in Rafah, surrounded by the bombs and the drones and the devastation. I should have been back a few months after that, but all travel, all medical teams were cancelled by Israel. But today, I want to mention health under attack. 13 countries this year have recorded health attacks. This link is to a surveillance site at WHO, a very good surveillance site that verifies and records attacks on healthcare. And they are rising faster than at any time in the history of these data collections. Michael Ryan is the head of the emergencies. I had the privilege of listening to him at WHO last year, and he talked about health attacks being a disease that has grown and spread. And I think it's something that we must, as a health community, be in solidarity about, loudly in solidarity with health colleagues, because health is moving from being simply an accidental something that gets attacked in the way of war. It's becoming the target of war. And that's a very, very serious change, and something that we should know about and advocate about wherever it happens in the world. You can see the figures from Gaza there, and can I say we've just passed 1,000 healthcare workers killed, 4 of them dying in detention, almost certainly after torture. And so we have this juxtaposition of humanity and inhumanity. And of course, anyone can be involved in either. We have to choose which side we want to represent. Not which politics, but which side of this divide, I would suggest. Because the reason humanitarian law is there is to protect. You see here it's to protect humanitarian workers, civilians, medical workers, refugees, prisoners of war, the wounded and the sick. And a very serious comment was made by the Chief Prosecutor, Karim Khan, of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. I won't maybe read all of it, but he's really reminding us that the basis of our humanitarian law is how we conduct ourselves in conflict. And it applies to everyone. No one should be immune. And how we apply it will prove that the lives of human beings have equal value. And just before I leave this, I want to meet Suha, a very dear colleague in Gaza. This was a quote she gave me early on, and one of the reasons why when I'm given the chance, I mention Gaza, because she asked me to be their voice outside. But read this last line. We don't ask more than life with peace and dignity like people all over the world, and to be considered a human being. And this morning, she wrote something else to me. She didn't know I was speaking. She said this: the world is divided into 2 categories depending on their religious or political backgrounds. Some see us, in Gaza, as a source of evil deserving death, and some see us as heroes deserving martyrdom, but no one has honored us by seeing us as human beings who deserve life without putting us in religious or political molds. No one has tried to see us as mere humans without classification. Second theme. The other ones will be a bit quicker. Reconciliation. When I think about peace, I think about this, because if there was no reconciliation, then this brokenness we've been talking about, there is little hope. But there has to be a way of healing ourselves, and a way in which we can, if we make a mistake, there is a way to learn from that mistake, to maybe restore and be healed. For many of this, again, this comes based in our faith, in the Christian faith. It's a very strong part of that. But I think you find these elements of reconciliation in all faiths and in those who don't have any. I love this picture of this bowl. Do you know what this is? Thank you, kintsugi, a tradition in Japanese tradition, which is actually not just a tradition about the pottery, it's a tradition in their way of life that broken things can become more beautiful than they were before they were broken. Even sometimes in a ceremonial way, things are broken in order to be made beautiful with gold. And for me, this is so encouraging. As a person, as those I work with, as a society between enemies, because as I often say when we're talking about the Middle East, peace isn't made between friends. They don't need to have peace made. It's made between enemies. So by definition, it is people who don't agree with one another who are finding a way to find reconciliation. It doesn't mean they agree on everything, but they find a way to respect each other as human beings. And I think it's important to think of our planet in this as well, because our planet has also been broken by our greed and our selfishness and the way we have used resources. So reconciliation is hugely important. And if it's something that we individually need to seek, then today is the best day to do that. Now, time for you to help me. Reconciliation also involves the ability to look at conflict in a different way. So I'm going to ask you some questions about conflict. I'd like some answers, true or false. Will you do that for me? Conflict should be avoided in healthy teams, true or false? Best to stick to your conflict style, the way you do conflict, and keep to it. Learn it and keep to it. Meaningful change will cause conflict. When conflict occurs, it is best when one person takes the lead. Conflict is an opportunity. So, of course, it depends how you answer it, but I would say that the last one is true, the rest are false. Yeah? Here's a beautiful beach I walked on during COVID. I was living near here, and there were some things that were quite difficult, and I used to walk on this beach and just try and think and pray. And this quote was something I read then. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of creative alternatives for responding to that conflict. Don't be too frightened of disagreeing. You do it with respect. Yeah, you do it seeing the other person as human and also with humility, because you might be the one who is the broken one who needs healing. But it is actually a profound opportunity for change, for learning and for change. And it is almost inevitable in organizations, particularly if you're wanting change. So how we manage it is so important, but the conflict itself may be an important process in growth. This is one tool. We've been engaged in something called the Compassionate Leadership Program. This is one tool. One of the reasons why I like this tool, it was developed by the Mennonites. And some of you may know the Mennonites are a Christian denomination, now mostly in North America. They came from Germany, who have always been pacifist and always promoted peace. So they have developed this conflict tool. They use it in big settings and in individuals. I won't teach it to you, but if you want to learn about it, you can look it up. But it has the agenda on the vertical axis as to how important an issue is, and then it has the relationship on the horizontal axis on how important that relationship is. And it suggests conflict styles that would match. So if you don't know the person, they're very rude to you, you're never going to meet them again, you can walk away. If you are in an emergency situation, if you're in a code situation, or there is a severe accident happens in front of you, then you may have someone take charge and really just say, this is what we're going to do, directing style. That's helpful. Perhaps it's something that's not really important, but it means a lot to the other person. In which case you say, no, this person means a lot to me. I don't agree, but it doesn't matter. So that's the harmonizing style. In the middle is not a place you should stay, but sometimes you say, well, let's do that today, but shall we make a time to talk about it and see how we can move forward together? That's the compromising style. And then the one that gets most results, but you shouldn't use it all the time, is this is really important to you. I feel this is also such an important issue, but I really respect you. I would love for us to be able to find a way that we can both move forward on this one. Yeah? Cooperating style. So just one example of how we can use conflict constructively. Here's another clinical situation we find ourselves in, meeting people in distress. This is a concept that actually Professor Chitra Venkateshwaran has taught me a lot about, is rather than trying to initially label a diagnosis when we see someone in profound distress, just to recognize the emotion and then begin to think of how we assess and how we support that person. So here we see like a dynamic picture where on the healthy side, how we respond in terms of our mood, our humor, our sleeping, when things are well, when we're settled. But then as we become more stressed, we move into distress. So we see that this normal mood fluctuation can become irritable, angry, maybe even aggressive. So when someone is being aggressive to you, just think, are they in this distress part? And then we see it also in the way we handle a conflict, the way we sleep, our physical, our social, our psychological. So it's a useful way to say, I'm recognizing someone is distressed. And then we can think about how to approach that. Some of these are core to areas like psychiatry, palliative care, but they're also, I think, good clinical skills. Listening, active listening, hearing the non-verbal as well as the verbal. When I'm saying listening, it's kind of seeing all of that together, offering empathy and compassion. And from that place, really good assessment. This is a flowchart that was used during COVID in India, developed with Chitra and others, which was to help elicit when there were red flag signs that needed further help, or whether there was distress that could be managed by the core team with maybe some training. My colleague in Manipur was saying, please, can people come and give us some training so we can go into the hills and the villages where people are incredibly traumatized and give them some help. These are some of the tools that would be used for that. Spiritual distress, how do we recognize that? I'm going to talk a little bit about spiritual assessment in a moment. Time is running short, so I'll keep going. But this word, our world has been shaken, was actually a phrase in Arabic that my colleagues were using when we were teaching in Gaza. It's a lovely word, isn't it, for spiritual distress. Our world has been shaken. Let me tell you a little story. 2 medical students in Gaza in April came to me in one of the neonatal units and said, Dr. Mhoira, do you remember us? You taught us. It's difficult here. No one is teaching us. We're interns, but we're feeling that we don't know what we're doing. At that point, I had just been given this baby, who was a baby with presumed anencephaly, but was born with hydrocephaly. And there were 3 and 4 babies to incubators. It was a very, very difficult situation, bombs coming down, and this baby was not expected to survive, but was still breathing. And someone says, I don't think we talked to relatives here about that. It was not a Gazan, an expatriate. And I knew that wasn't true, but I also knew my Arabic wasn't good enough to have that conversation. So these 2 girls and myself went down. We spoke with the father, the mother, the aunties, the granny, a lot of tears, but also we took some photographs. Here's the picture of the father with his little baby. It was a really profound moment, a beautiful moment, a sad moment of connection in the middle of this difficult time. And I was very grateful that I happened to be there at that moment by God's grace, and the 2 students were with me. They said it was like walking into the slideshow, except we were part of it. It was very moving. So the next concept is presence. I just have 2 more. I'll move a little fast. You know this poem, I think, yeah? You know this poem, very famous, the idea that in our hardest times, rather than God abandoning us, he's holding us. And, you know, it is again one of the greatest reassurances to me that in those tough times, when we are saying, where is God? Why does this happen? The promise is, I am with you. But even more amazing is he says, you are my hands and feet. You are the people that are with people, are beside people at some of their hardest times in their lives. And healthcare offers us that. You have compassion running through the whole of PCMCH. Compassion, presence. You don't always have to speak. You say, I will not abandon you. You will not be left alone. You will not be discarded. We have a colleague who did a piece of research which looked at the narrative discussion. So an active listening, expert assessment of spiritual issues, asking about meaning and purpose and hope, itself is a spiritual support tool. And I want to mention just end-of-life care. End-of-life care, we sometimes are afraid of. You know, people like me have told you for years, palliative care is not just end-of-life care, and it is not, but it is also end-of-life care. It's such a precious time. You only get to do this once. You can't go back tomorrow and try a new technique if someone is actively dying. So how do we do that? How do we make sure the quality is good? How do we involve the palliative care team early, particularly if we see any distress, or even just to help navigate through the difficulties and the distress of times like this, so that it can be those precious moments and hours that people want it to be? Which of those two diagrams do you think would be an image of end-of-life care that you would like? The top one? The bottom one? This is flying around at the moment. It just was shared on some of our palliative care sites. And of course, this can be in a hospital setting. You know, it can be, we can make end-of-life care physically okay. We can manage the symptoms. We can make sure that somebody is not vomiting, that we're not got too many lines. They can hold their hands. We can have the mouth dry and moist and let those moments be precious and let the spiritual content be the one that is the most important. So please do think about that and involving the teams. I know Lydia and the team would be very happy to be asked to be involved. And it's such an important area. We often use this question when people say, how do I know? I'm not going to teach all about end-of-life care, but it's a good, just say to yourself, would I be surprised if this person was still alive next week or tomorrow? And that can help us make the right decisions. This is a UK colleague who's done a lot to help the general population understand why normal dying is something we should not be afraid of. And these are some of the questions that people have, research has shown that people want to have. Reconciliation, humanity, forgiveness and being forgiven. To let people have those conversations, we need the communication skills, to be honest, to recognize what's happening, to control the symptoms. And then there's a lot of things we need to do. Recognize, communicate well, make good decisions together, help the families, and have a good plan of care early. Don't have the nurses saying, why are we still trying to give all these medicines, when actually it's a waste of time and it's causing a lot of distress. There's some frameworks. This is one I use a lot, the Red Map framework, which can just help people have these conversations. And if you want any more information, Lydia, I know you'll be happy to share that or to do some training sessions. I'm going to not tell about Simon. I'm going to move on to the last picture, hope. Because looking through all of that process, we need to come to a place of hope. And I would ask you just to think yourself, what gives you hope? When I told you those difficult things and your heart sank a bit, where do you find your hope? In Gaza, people sometimes are talking to me about stubborn hope. It doesn't make any sense, but they're holding on to it because otherwise only despair is left behind. So nurture hope in your life, whatever brings hope. I was hearing about a young colleague who went to play with a child last night. That can be a source of hope, can't it? New life, energy. Because the essence of spiritual support is finding meaning and connectedness and purpose. For many of us, that comes from our faith, but it's where we make sense of things. And if spiritually we're in distress, we're going to struggle to do this. And actually, this is something that we teach our medical students. Do you teach your medical students spiritual assessment here? I hope so. Here's some of the tools we can use even there. Talk to people about their sources of hope. How I ask about that is actually this one. Where do you find strength in times like this? In your life, when you have faced difficult times, what gives you hope? So you're moving into looking at people's coping and resilience. You might find it's very empty. You might find it's very full. This is the T-shirt of my team in Uganda who do a community program from the local church. Do you see the tagline? Bringing hope, bringing joy. So we look here at the sources of hope and strength, whether there's a faith context, what are the personal issues, and how it should affect us. Just a few quotes just as I finish. Mahmoud Darwish is a famous Palestinian poet, and this picture was taken by me in Gaza a couple of years ago. Without hope, we are lost. The hope must spring from simple things, from the splendor of nature, from the beauty of life, from their fragility. One may forget the essential things occasionally, if only to keep the mind healthy. Desmond Tutu. I love this quote. I'm not an optimist. I'm a prisoner of hope. And I don't know if you know Desmond Tutu, a very famous archbishop from South Africa, very active during the apartheid days, very supportive of the Palestinian apartheid too. But this was a picture and the way he often was. So he was symbolizing hope and joy. Palliative care has this at its heart, and I know other areas do. This is a patient in Uganda who said the palliative care gave her hope, gave her pain control, and gave her love. It's a lovely combination. She was saying this at a national meeting, so she said to the Minister of Health, make sure everyone has this care. And I think I would say the same today. Doesn't mean it has to be given by one team, but all of us need some of these competencies in our day-to-day practice. And how will this affect you? Just take those things away. How will this affect you in the way you look at yourself, your others, those who are marginalized and suffering? How the world treats one another when we look at these conflict areas and the planet? Remembering those beautiful verses from Matthew 25, whatever you do for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And this was the statement I made. I'll just leave it up there, perhaps, on World Health as a Bridge to Peace. I would encourage us to think of how we could be engaged in this program, either in small ways or even engaging. The WHO asks for people to engage and report. How can we see those elements of humanity and reconciliation, of presence, real presence, where we don't always have to speak or do, and also bringing hope in the midst of trouble? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mhoira. I mean, I think all of us, as usual, you kind of give such moving talks, and we kind of get, I think it's very stirring, touching, because it's also your way of saying things where you combine everything together, but also come to the basics of care, what we do. So it starts from the individual, but then also goes out to the, a global level and to the planet and the humanity as such. So I think it's very, very meaningful, and I think probably all of us would carry some messages to reflect and then work on that. I would invite one or two comments or questions so that we can go about our work after this. Any questions or comments? Alice.
Just a comment. Thank you, Dr. Mhoira, for such a wonderful talk. I did not expect this. I didn't know what to expect. To combine health and peace. I know that you're working in Gaza through Chitra, so I kind of had some idea, but the way you combined it to conflict management, which I can use in my personal life, and conflict management at Gaza, and then taking it to palliative care and end of life. So it was really comprehensive, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Alice. Anyone? Any questions? Thank you so much. I think we'll close the day's session. Yeah.
Thank you, dear Dr. Mhoira, for that wonderful talk, and thank you, Jomsi sir, for giving us this wonderful opportunity, and also Chitra ma'am for moderating the session. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all.